The year was 2157, and New Seoul was bright with both Earth's lights and alien signs. The streets were busy with humans and aliens walking together. Some aliens were tall, some had different colored skin, but everyone usually got along well. Mrs. Anderson's restaurant sat on a quiet corner of the International District. She was 75 years old, but she still came to work every day with a smile. Her restaurant, Earth and Stars Kitchen, was special because it served both human soul food and alien dishes. The smell of her famous fried chicken, mixed with strange but nice alien spices, filled the air. That morning, Mrs. Anderson was setting up for the day. She had just finished putting fresh flowers on the tables when the door opened. Officer Kang walked in. He wasn't human. His skin had a slight purple tint, and his eyes were too big for a human face. He was from a planet near Proxima Centauri, and he was supposed to help keep peace between humans and aliens. "Good morning, officer," Mrs. Anderson said with a polite smile. She had seen him before, watching her restaurant from across the street. Something about him had always made her nervous. Officer Kang didn't smile back. He walked around the restaurant, running his long finger across the tables. "Nice place you have here," he said. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. It would be sad if something happened to it. Mrs. Anderson's hands shook a little, but her voice stayed strong. "Is there something I can help you with, officer?" "Protection isn't free on this street," Officer Kang said. He turned to face her. 5,000 credits a week should do it. For your safety, of course." His uniform gleamed under the lights, but there was nothing clean about the way he smiled. "That's not right," Mrs. Anderson said. She stood straighter, even though she barely came up to his chest. "I pay my taxes. I follow all the rules, both Earth rules and galactic ones." Officer Kang moved closer. His shadow fell over her. "Rules change, old woman. Especially for—" He looked her up and down with his big purple eyes. "Your kind." Across the street, Lee Soo-ho was opening his own restaurant. He was 65 and had served in the Korean military before aliens came to Earth. Through his window, he saw Officer Kang towering over Mrs. Anderson. He saw the alien's hand move to the strange weapon on his belt. Mrs. Anderson didn't back down. "My kind?" she asked. Her voice was quiet but clear. "My kind helped build this community. My kind has been running restaurants and feeding people, all kinds of people, for generations, even before your people came to Earth." Officer Kang's face turned darker purple with anger. He knocked a vase off the nearest table. It shattered on the floor, sending flowers and water everywhere. "You have 1 day to get the credits," he growled. "Tomorrow, things won't be so nice." Lee Soo-ho had seen enough. As Officer Kang stormed out of the restaurant, Soo-ho reached for his phone. His hands moved quickly as he typed a message to an old friend. Someone who had always stood up for what was right. Someone who now worked with both humans and aliens. The message was simple. "John, we need your help. Officer Kang is threatening Mrs. Anderson. It's bad this time." Inside her restaurant, Mrs. Anderson looked at the broken vase and spilled flowers. Her hands were shaking, but she started cleaning up anyway. She had lived through too much on Earth to let some alien bully scare her away. But as she picked up the broken pieces, she wondered if maybe this time she needed help to stand her ground. Lee Soo-ho watched through his restaurant window as Officer Kang walked away from Mrs. Anderson's place. His hands were still shaking with anger as he waited for John Cena to respond to his message. Soo-ho had known John for 15 years, ever since the famous wrestler had visited South Korea as part of Earth's first diplomatic team to meet the aliens. The morning sun reflected off the tall buildings of New Seoul. Some of these buildings reached so high they had special docking areas for alien ships. Soo-ho remembered when this area had been just small shops and homes. Now it was a mix of Earth culture and alien technology. His phone made a soft sound. John had answered. "On my way. Keep watching. Don't let him hurt her." Soo-ho put down the phone and looked at the old photos on his wall. One showed him in his military uniform, standing next to a much younger John Cena. They had worked together training Earth's first security teams to deal with alien visitors. Now John worked as an important person who helped humans and aliens understand each other better. Across the street, Mrs. Anderson was still cleaning up the broken vase. Suho wanted to go help her, but he knew he needed to watch for Officer Kang. The alien cop had been causing trouble in the neighborhood for months. He asked shop owners for money, threatened them, and sometimes broke things, but no one had been brave enough to report him because he was an alien officer. Suho's restaurant door opened, and Park Jae-yun walked in. She was John's assistant, but Suho knew she used to work for South Korea's intelligence agency. She looked like a normal office worker in her neat business suit, but Suho had seen her fight before. "Tell me everything," Jae-yun said, sitting down at the counter. Her face was serious as she took out a small recording device. Suho told her about the morning's events. He described how Officer Kang had threatened Mrs. Anderson and demanded money. As he spoke, Jae-yun's eyes narrowed. She asked careful questions about times, dates, and other times Officer Kang had caused trouble. "John will be here in 10 minutes, Jae-yun said when Suho finished talking. "He was in a meeting with some Proximan leaders when he got your message. That might help us." Just then, they heard a crash from across the street. Through the window, they saw Officer Kang had returned. He was standing in Mrs. Anderson's doorway again. "We need to do something," Suho said, starting to stand up. Jae-yun put a hand on his arm. "Wait," she said. "John is almost here. We need to handle this carefully. If we make a mistake, Officer Kang could use it against all the human businesses in this area." They watched as Officer Kang walked into Mrs. Anderson's restaurant again. This time, he wasn't alone. 2 more alien officers were with him. They were all from Proxima, with the same purple skin and big eyes. "He's trying to scare her before John gets here," Jae-yun said. She took out her phone and started recording video through the window. Suho felt helpless watching. He had been a soldier. He had fought in battles. But this was different. One wrong move could cause trouble for everyone in the neighborhood. A large black car pulled up outside. John Cena stepped out, wearing a formal Earth diplomatic uniform. He looked at Suho's restaurant and nodded once. Then he walked straight toward Mrs. Anderson's door. "Now," said Jae-yun with a small smile, "we can do something about Officer Kang." John Cena walked into Mrs. Anderson's restaurant with calm, steady steps. The morning light streamed through the windows, showing the mess Officer Kang and his partners had made. More flowers lay scattered on the floor, and several chairs were turned over. Mrs. Anderson stood behind her counter, her head held high despite her fear. Officer Kang and his 2 alien partners turned to face the door when John entered. Their purple skin darkened when they recognized him. "Is there a problem here?" John asked. His voice was quiet but firm. He wore his diplomatic uniform with the Earth Peace Council badge that showed he worked with both humans and aliens. "This is not your business, human diplomat," Officer Kang said. His voice sounded rougher than before. "We are conducting official police work." Park Jae-yun walked in behind John. She carried a small silver device in her hand. "Official police work?" she asked. "Then you won't mind that I've been recording everything that happened here today." The 2 alien officers with Kang looked nervous, but Kang himself grew angry. "Recording police business is against the law," he growled. "No," John said, stepping forward. "Recording public officials in public places is protected under both Earth law and Galactic Federation rules. You know this, Officer Kang." Mrs. Anderson moved from behind her counter to stand next to John. "These officers were demanding protection money," she said clearly. 5,000 credits a week. One of Kang's partner officers stepped back. "Captain Kang, you said this was a regular inspection," he said, using Kang's real rank for the first time. John's eyes narrowed. "Captain, you've been pretending to be a regular officer to avoid attention." He turned to Jae-yun. "Send the recordings to Earth Security and the Galactic Federation office. Captain Kang moved fast. His hand went to his weapon, but John was faster. In one smooth motion, John stepped between Kang and Mrs. Anderson. His diplomatic badge glowed bright blue. "Think carefully, Captain," John said. "That badge records everything within 10 feet of me. The Federation will see whatever you do next." The two other alien officers backed away from their captain. They could see this situation was becoming dangerous for their careers. "You're making a mistake," Captain Kang said. His voice was full of anger. "You don't understand how things work in this sector. Some people need to be kept in their place." "The only person who needs to be kept in their place is you, Captain," Mrs. Anderson said. She wasn't afraid anymore. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 50 years. I've seen bullies come and go. You're just another bully with a fancy uniform." Lee Suho entered the restaurant with more people behind him. Other shop owners from the street had gathered, humans and aliens together. They had all seen Captain Kang's cruel behavior over the past months. "We have evidence of your actions in other businesses," Jia said, holding up her device. "Money taken, property damage, threats made, all recorded and ready to send to the Federation." Captain Kang looked around. He saw he was losing control. His partners had moved away from him. The crowd in the doorway watched with angry eyes, but instead of backing down, he smiled an ugly smile. "Very well," he said. "If this is how you want to handle things, human diplomat, there are official ways to settle this. I challenge you under proximate law. Combat challenge. Winner takes all." The crowd gasped. A combat challenge was serious. Under galactic law, if John accepted, the fight would be legal and binding. The winner's word would become law in this matter. John looked at Mrs. Anderson, then at the crowd of worried faces. He knew what he had to do. "I accept your challenge, Captain Kang," he said. "Under proximate law and Federation rules. Let's settle this properly." Kim Dae-sung's office was filled with books about alien laws. He was the best legal expert in New Seoul when it came to Galactic Federation rules. John Cena sat across from his desk while Park Jae-hyun explained the situation. "A proximate combat challenge is very serious," Dae-sung said, adjusting his glasses. "Once accepted, it cannot be taken back. The winner's decision becomes law for the specific matter being challenged." John nodded. "I understand. But we need to make sure the challenge covers everything. Not just Mrs. Anderson's restaurant, but all the businesses Captain Kang has been threatening." Dae-sung opened a large book with strange alien writing on its cover. "The challenge must be worded perfectly. One wrong word, and Captain Kang could find a way around it even if you win." Jae-hyun placed her recording device on the desk. "We have evidence of his actions against 12 different businesses in the past 3 months." "Good," Dae-sung said. "We can use that. Under proximate law, a challenge can cover past actions if there is proof." He started writing on a special paper with official Federation markings. Outside the office window, they could see spaceships moving between the tall buildings of New Seoul. The city had changed so much since aliens arrived, but some things stayed the same, like bullies who thought they could hurt people who couldn't fight back. "There's something else you should know," Dae-sung said, looking serious. "Captain Kang has enhanced strength. Most proximans are already stronger than humans, but he has military upgrades, special implants in his muscles." "Is that legal in a challenge fight?" Jae-hyun asked. "Yes, if they were installed before the challenge was made." "And his were?" Dae-sung showed them another book, but there are rules about how he can use them. John stood up and walked to the window. "The implants don't matter," he said. "I've trained with alien wrestlers before. Strength isn't everything." Dae-sung finished writing the challenge document. "The fight will take place in 3 days at the New Seoul Arena. That's the standard waiting period. During this time, neither of you can take any action against the other or any businesses involved." 3 days isn't much time to prepare," Jae-hyun said, worried. "It's enough," John replied. "But I need to make a call. There's someone who can help me get ready. Dae-sung held up the finished document. The alien writing on it seemed to shine. This challenge states that if you win, Captain Kang must leave Earth law enforcement forever. He must pay back all the money he took, plus extra for damages. And he must face Federation justice for his crimes. And if he wins, Jae-yun asked quietly. If he wins, he gets legal control over all the businesses he targeted, and John would have to leave his diplomatic position. Dae-sung looked very serious. The stakes are very high. John took the document and signed his name at the bottom. His signature glowed blue next to the alien writing. Now we need to deliver this to Captain Kang. Be careful, Dae-sung warned. The 3 days before a challenge are dangerous. Kang can't hurt you directly, but he might try to stop you from preparing. Let him try, John said. He looked at the spaceships flying past the window. I made a promise to protect Earth's people when I took this job. It's time to keep that promise. Jae-yun picked up her device. I'll start arranging security. And we need to tell Mrs. Anderson and the others what's happening. Tell them to be brave for 3 more days, John said. After that, things will change in New Seoul, one way or another. Master Han's training center sat on the outskirts of New Seoul. The old building looked ordinary from outside, but inside it held secrets of both Earth and alien fighting styles. Master Han himself was 70 years old, but he moved like someone much younger. Your opponent has enhanced strength, Master Han said as he walked around John Cena. They stood in a large training room with strange markings on the floor. But Proximan fighting has 3 major weaknesses. John wore simple training clothes instead of his diplomatic uniform. Park Jae-yun sat nearby, taking notes as Master Han spoke. The morning sun came through high windows, making patterns on the training mats. First weakness, Master Han continued, they rely too much on their strength. Second, they cannot bend backward easily. Third, they have poor eyesight on their left side. Dr. Michelle Anderson, Mrs. Anderson's granddaughter, stood up from her chair. She was a scientist who studied alien biology. Master Han is right, she said. Proximan's spine structure is different from humans. They have extra muscles for strength, but less flexibility. Show me, John said to Master Han. The old master moved incredibly fast. One moment he stood still. The next he was behind John. Proximans always expect direct attacks, he said. They don't understand circular movement. For the next several hours, Master Han taught John special moves. He showed how to use a Proximan's strength against them, how to move in ways they couldn't follow, and how to strike their weak points. Captain Kang will try to grab you, Dr. Anderson explained while John practiced. Proximan fighting style is all about holding and crushing, but their grip can be broken if you twist at the right angle. Jae-yun brought them water and news from the city. People are worried, she said, but they're also hopeful. Many shop owners have put up pictures of John in their windows. No pressure, John said with a small smile. He was tired, but he kept practicing. Master Han made John repeat each move hundreds of times. Your body must remember without thinking, he said. In the fight, you won't have time to think. As the sun began to set, Dr. Anderson shared more important information. Proximans get tired faster than humans in long fights, she said. Their enhanced strength uses a lot of energy. If you can make the fight last, Captain Kang will become slower. But be careful, Master Han warned. One solid hit from him could end the fight. You must not let him catch you. They trained until late into the night. The city lights of New Seoul glowed through the windows. John's muscles ached, but he didn't stop. Every time he felt tired, he thought of Mrs. Anderson standing up to Captain Kang. He thought of all the other shop owners who needed help. Tomorrow we train again, Master Han said finally. And the next day, then you fight. As they prepared to leave, Jae-yun received a message on her phone. Her face turned worried. Captain Kang has been practicing too, she said. Someone saw him at the Alien Combat Center. He broke 3 training robots. "Good," John said, surprising everyone. "That means he's nervous. He knows this fight matters." Master Han nodded with approval. "Remember," he said, "you fight not just for yourself, but for everyone in New Seoul who needs protection from bullies. This is about more than one fight." John looked at his tired reflection in the training room mirror. 2 more days to prepare. 2 days until he faced Captain Kang. 2 days to get ready to protect his city. The New Seoul arena was filled with people and aliens on the day of the fight. Large screens hung from the ceiling, showing close-up views of the fighting area. Mrs. Anderson sat in the front row with other shop owners. Master Han and Dr. Anderson stood near the entrance to the fighting floor. John Cena wore simple black fighting clothes with the Earth Peace Council symbol on the chest. He stood quietly, remembering everything he had learned. Park Jae-yun checked his protective gear one last time. "Remember the training," she said softly. "Don't let him grab you." Captain Kang entered from the other side of the arena. His purple skin looked darker than usual, and his uniform had been replaced with Proximan fighting gear. The crowd grew quiet when they saw his enhanced muscles moving under his skin. Kim Dae-sung stood in the center of the fighting area. As the legal expert, he would make sure both fighters followed the rules. "This combat challenge will follow Proximan law," he announced. His voice echoed through the arena. "The winner's terms become binding under Federation law." John and Captain Kang walked to the center. They stood face to face while Dae-sung repeated the terms they had agreed to. John could hear Mrs. Anderson praying softly from her seat. "Begin," Dae-sung said, and quickly moved away. Captain Kang attacked immediately. He moved faster than anyone expected, trying to grab John with his enhanced strength. But John had been waiting for this. He moved in a circular pattern, just as Master Han had taught him. Kang's hands caught only air. The crowd gasped as John ducked under another grab attempt. He struck quickly at Kang's left side, where Proximans had poor vision. Kang growled in anger and spun around, but John was already moving. "Stand still and fight," Kang shouted. He charged forward like a bull. John remembered Master Han's words about using the opponent's strength against them. He waited until the last second, then stepped aside while grabbing Kang's arm. The alien's momentum carried him forward, and John used it to throw him off balance. Kang crashed into the floor but got up quickly. His enhanced muscles tensed as he prepared for another attack. But John could see what Dr. Anderson had explained. The powerful muscles were already using too much energy. The fight continued. John kept moving, never staying in one place long enough for Kang to grab him. He struck quick blows at the weak points they had identified in training. Each time Kang attacked, John turned the alien's strength against him. 20 minutes passed. Kang's movements became slower. His enhanced muscles needed more energy than his body could provide. Sweat dripped from his purple skin, and his breathing was heavy. "This ends now," Kang roared. He charged one last time, putting all his remaining strength into a final attack. John saw his opportunity. As Kang reached for him, John moved in the way Master Han had shown him. A motion Proximan bodies couldn't copy. He slipped past Kang's grasp and struck 3 precise hits: left side, spine, and balance point. Captain Kang fell hard. He tried to stand but couldn't make his enhanced muscles work properly. The energy was gone. He had lost. "The challenge is complete," Dae-sung announced. "John Cena is the winner." The arena erupted in cheers. Mrs. Anderson wiped tears from her eyes, while the other shop owners hugged each other. Master Han nodded with quiet pride. John walked over to where Captain Kang still lay on the floor. He offered his hand to help the alien up, showing respect even in victory. "It's over," he said simply. "Now you will face justice for what you've done." The day after the fight, New Seoul's International District was full of celebration. People had put up colorful banners across the streets. Both humans and aliens gathered at Mrs. Anderson's restaurant, which had become a symbol of their victory over injustice. Inside the restaurant, Cena sat with Mrs. Anderson, eating a bowl of her famous fusion soup that mixed Earth spices with alien ingredients. His muscles were sore from the fight, but his spirit was high. The Security Council has taken Captain Kang into custody, Park Jae-yun reported as she entered the restaurant. They found records in his office showing he had been stealing money from businesses across 3 different Earth cities. Mrs. Anderson nodded with satisfaction. "Sometimes the biggest bullies fall the hardest," she said, putting another bowl of soup in front of John. "Eat more. My grandmother always said good food helps healing." Lee Soo-ho came in from his restaurant across the street. He carried a large box filled with money. "The Federation made Captain Kang return all the credits he took," he explained, "plus extra for damages, just like the challenge agreement said." The news spread quickly through the district. Shop owners who had lived in fear of Captain Kang for months could finally relax. Some cried with relief when they got their money back. Master Han visited later that afternoon. He watched the celebrations from a quiet corner of Mrs. Anderson's restaurant. "You did more than win a fight," he told John. "You showed that humans and aliens can work together to stop corruption." Dr. Michelle Anderson agreed. She had been studying the medical reports from the fight. "The Federation doctors were impressed," she said. "They didn't think a human could beat enhanced Proximan strength. You proved that technique and training matter more than pure power." Throughout the day, alien officials came to the restaurant. They apologized to Mrs. Anderson and the other business owners for not stopping Captain Kang sooner. The officials promised to make changes in how they chose and watched their officers on Earth. "We will create new rules," one alien official said. "Earth representatives will help choose alien police officers from now on. No one should be afraid of those who are supposed to protect them." Park Jae-yun had more good news. "The Federation is creating a special team," she explained. "They want John to help train both human and alien police officers. They want to make sure everyone learns to work together properly." As evening came, the celebration continued. The streets were lit with both traditional Korean lanterns and glowing alien lights. People shared food from all cultures. Mrs. Anderson's restaurant was so full that tables had been set up outside. John watched it all from his seat near the window. He saw humans and aliens talking and laughing together. He saw shop owners who had been afraid to speak now standing tall and proud. "You know what this reminds me of?" Mrs. Anderson said, sitting down next to him. "When I was a girl, my mother told me stories about people standing up to bullies. She said the real victory isn't just beating the bully, it's bringing people together afterward." John smiled as he looked at the happy crowd. "Your mother was very wise," he said, "and her daughter is just as wise." Outside, the sun was setting over New Seoul. The city's lights began to shine, Earth lights and alien lights glowing together in the growing darkness. The international district had changed. It was stronger now, not because of one victory, but because its people, human and alien, had learned they could stand together against injustice. 1 month after the fight, the international district of New Seoul had changed in wonderful ways. Song Min-ji, a young diplomat who had watched John's victory, had worked hard to create new rules for Earth and alien police to work together. These rules would protect everyone, no matter where they came from. Mrs. Anderson's restaurant had become famous. People came from all over Earth and even other planets to eat there. She had hired 3 new workers to help with all the customers. Every morning, she put fresh flowers on the tables, just like always. But now no one knocked them over. "Business is good," she told John one quiet morning before the restaurant opened. "But the best part is seeing everyone feel safe again." John nodded as he looked around the restaurant. The walls now had pictures from the day of the fight, showing how the community had come together. Next to these were photos of the celebration afterward, with humans and aliens standing side by side. Park Jae-yun entered with important news. "The Federation Council has approved the new protection laws," she said, showing them the official document on her tablet. "They're calling them the Anderson Rules, after you, Mrs. Anderson." Mrs. Anderson wiped happy tears from her eyes. My mother would be so proud, she said softly. She always told me to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Lee Suho came in from his restaurant across the street. He carried a special certificate that showed he was now part of the New Earth Alien Business Council. This group helped make sure all shop owners were treated fairly. We're teaching each other, Suho explained. The aliens learn about Earth business traditions, and we learn about their ways. It's better when we work together. Master Han had started teaching both humans and aliens at his training center. He showed them how different fighting styles could work together, just as different peoples could work together. Dr. Michelle Anderson often visited his classes to explain the science behind the movements. Understanding each other makes us stronger, Master Han told his students. Just as John used knowledge to win his fight, we can use understanding to build peace. The biggest change was in the police force. Now, human and alien officers worked in pairs. They learned from each other and protected everyone equally. Captain Kang's replacement was a kind proximate officer who often visited the shops to make sure everyone felt safe. John's diplomatic work had grown more important. Other cities on Earth wanted to learn from New Soul's example. He traveled to teach them about the Anderson rules and how to make their communities stronger. The fight was just the beginning. John told a group of new diplomats, "The real victory is what we build afterward." One evening, Mrs. Anderson held a special dinner. She invited everyone who had helped during the hard times. John, Jai-yun, Suho, Master Han, Dr. Anderson, and many others. The restaurant was filled with delicious smells from both Earth and alien recipes. As they ate together, Mrs. Anderson stood up to speak. "When I was a girl," she said, "my mother taught me that food brings people together. But she also taught me that justice is like a seed. If we plant it and care for it, it grows into something beautiful that can feed many people." She looked around at all the faces, human and alien, that had become her friends. "That's what happened here," she continued. "We planted justice, and look what grew. Friendship, understanding, and a better way of living together." The sun set over New Seoul, its light shining on the mix of Earth buildings and alien architecture. In the warm glow of Mrs. Anderson's restaurant, humans and aliens shared food, stories, and hope for the future they were building together.